I love writing books about heroines learning how to trust themselves and ask for what they want and kind of come into their own. I don't think that I would be able to write books that resonated with people if I hadn't been through challenges and a lot of discrimination about her eyesight that Steff in the past would have just brushed off, and that's the way the world is. But Steff now is like, well, we should perhaps change that. My name is Steff Green, and I am a self-published author of more than 50 paranormal, dark and gothic romance novels. Old, dead ruins and things really fascinate me, and so that ripples through everything in my life. I do write a lot of books where they're focused around ancient mythology or kind of myths and legends or secret societies.
Wanted. Assistant/shelf stacker/general dog's body to work in second-hand bookshop. Must be fluent in classical literature, detest electronic books and all who indulge them, and have experience answering inane customer questions for 8 hours straight. The person who wrote that ad really doesn't want to hire an assistant. Unfortunately, he or she hadn't counted on me, Wilhelmina Wilde, recently failed fashion designer, owner of 2 wonky eyes, and pathetic excuse for a human.
I live in South Head on the Kaipara coast with my husband James and our 4 cantankerous cats and a flock of sheep. The condition that I have is called achromatopsia. It's very rare, there's about 10 of us in the country. Part of having achromatopsia means that you'll usually be quite short-sighted, and I'm short-sighted to the point where I'm considered legally blind. I can't see any colours, so anything where you need colour vision, I need a bit of help. I have real trouble with depth perception, can't see a step. I sort of technically don't even see black and white, but I like to tell people that it's like seeing the world in 50 shades of grey. So I'm quite a big fan of cooking, so I have a few little kind of things in my kitchen that I have there specifically to kind of help me. So I've got quite a dark kitchen. I've got lots of black and red. That helps me see things against it, so it's much easier for me to see the pot against the dark. And I have this bench that's extra high, so I can have my mixing bowls up nice and close to my face, so I can sort of see what I'm doing, so I don't have to bend over like this. Everybody's eyes have 2 types of cells. We have rod cells, which we use at night. That's like our night vision cells. And we have cone cells, which we use during the day to distinguish colours and depth perception. And most of us have millions of each of those types of cells. So I've got a bunch of rod cells, but I have no cone cells. So that means that all the time I'm using my night vision. So it's kind of like being snowblind. You're very kind of susceptible to glare. Don't put this. I've got a piece of you. At the moment, there's no cure. It's a stable condition. I sort of won't get any better, won't get any worse. I am just checking my recipe. The glasses that I wear are prescription glass, so it helps kind of sharpen up the edges of things that are quite blurry. And having the tint in it helps my eyes judge depth perception, and it can actually help me distinguish colours. I remember being about 6 years old, and I was in my bedroom and I was putting my glasses back in my glass case, which was the thing my mum always said, put your glasses in your glass case so they don't get ruined. Suddenly dawned on me, why does no one else have to put their glasses back in their glass case? That was sort of the moment when it suddenly occurred to me that it's not a thing that everyone else does. I grew up in a small town in central Hawke's Bay called Waipawa. Childhood Steff was very creative. I loved to play dress-ups and invent games and all those kind of things. I was a very weird child. I was quite shy. I was obsessed with dinosaurs for years and years and years. And then I got really obsessed with ancient Egypt for like decades. Growing up, people were mean to me because of my eyesight and my sort of general weirdness. I couldn't play sports very well. And that was a big part of social life, especially in a small town. And, kids were awful because they didn't understand.
I smoothed my hair, sucked in a breath, pushed open the creaking shop door and stepped back in time. As the shop bell tinkled and the smell of musty paper filled my nostrils, I became 9 years old again. The weird, outcast kid. Books became my friends. Characters like Jane Eyre and Dorian Gray, the perfect substitutes for the kids who were horrible to me.
From a very young age, I always knew that I wanted to be an archaeologist. So I went to Auckland Uni to study archaeology, ancient history, hieroglyphs. I went to Greece for 6 weeks on an archaeology field school, and I did all these digs all over New Zealand, and it was amazing. Until the point where I finished uni and I tried to find a job. Suddenly it became, we think you're a health and safety risk, or we don't trust you around artifacts. I was kind of shocked that someone would be that kind of blatantly discriminatory, and I couldn't say any of that out loud, so I just said, okay, fine, and I went home and I cried. And my husband, James, he saw me cry, and he said, well, you could kind of look at this a couple of different ways. You could keep going and you could keep pushing, or you could kind of say, what would I do next where no one could tell me I couldn't do it? And in my head, the very first thing that came to mind was I would be a writer, which is something that I've always done in my room, late at night. At the time, there was only one option if you wanted to be a novelist. You had to get a traditional publisher to accept your books for publication. So I worked for about 10 years with a traditional publisher, and I was over the moon. I was like, finally, my dream is coming true. It was not a lot of money, but it was the beginning. It was the beginning of the dream. And then my editor decided to retire. They cut basically half of the books that were contracted, and I was one of those people that got cut.
That night, I lay in bed, staring at the cracks radiating across the ceiling, wondering how long I had until the details of the plasterboard and the chip cornice were only memories, and the light above my head would disappear forever. How can I be me if I can't see?
I was looking at these books that I had written and, all the things I had thought were going to be happening in my future, and thinking, God, I just have to start all over again from scratch now. And around this time, I had been given a Kindle, and I discovered how amazing that is, especially for a visually impaired person, because I can make the font size of any book in the world into a large print book. And then writers online were starting to talk about how they were using Amazon's self-publishing to publish their books. And I thought, well, I've got these books that I aren't doing anything with, so maybe I'll give this a go. So I self-published the first book in the series, and it sold like 10 copies. I published the next one and the next one, and I was making about $10 or $20 a month. And then I went to a party, And a friend of mine was talking about 50 Shades of Grey. And she loved the series. And I had read the first couple of chapters and I thought it was terrible.
Oh, okay, right.
So I was being a bit of a judgmental Nelly about it. And she sort of said to me, kind of jokingly, well, it's not like you could write a book like that. But in the back of my head, I thought, well, challenge accepted. So without telling anyone, not even my husband, I wrote this paranormal, steamy romance book. And it was about a guy who was a fox shapeshifter. And he was a reclusive artist. And he couldn't kind of show his face in public because he was afraid that he would sort of randomly turn into a fox. They sent this young curator to his house to pick up the paintings and they fall in love. It was ridiculous. And I loved every minute of it. And I threw it up on Amazon and I tell my friend in like 6 months and we'd have a laugh about it. And then it sold 1,000 copies in a week. And I sort of had to sheepishly tell James that I'd actually made money this month. What have you got on today, husband?
I'm just writing some training stuff for work.
It wasn't from my super serious science fiction novels. It was from the paranormal, sexy romance that I'd written in 3 weeks. And when he had finished laughing his ass off about it, he said, well, are you going to write some more? And I thought, well, yes, I am. And I have more than 50 novels published under Stephanie Holmes. And I do about 1 novel every 2 months. And I have no intention of stopping because it is far too much fun. I use this invert colour feature, which is the black background with the white writing. And this cuts out a lot of the glare, so it makes it a lot happier for me to look at the screen for long periods of time. And then my husband has built this little stand for the computer so that I can get the screen so that it's sort of right in front of my face. Then I have a keyboard which is black with a backlighting behind it. I try to write 4,000 words a day. So I write like a really rough draft of a book in about 3 days. Then I go over it and I make it make sense. And then I do 2 final drafts where I'm basically focused on kind of adding the extra zhuzh. I give the book to James and he reads it and tears it to pieces. And then I fix all the errors that he's found. Then I send that to my editor who lives in the States. And then she tears it to pieces. And then I fix all her errors. And then I send it to my proofreader who is in Australia. And she gives it a final polish. And then basically we upload to Amazon and we click publish.
I ran my fingers over the spine and a sliver of ice drove into the back of my neck. I flipped open the cover, expecting to see towers of skulls and mirror writing. Instead, every page was blank. I closed the book and studied the cover, wondering if the symbol held a clue as to what it was and why it was blank. "What are you doing here?" a voice growled low behind me.
I'm so excited. So, Acacia did these for me, and so there's obviously some different options. So originally we were kind of looking at this purple, which kind of takes the purple from the old covers and kind of, gives it this funky new vibe. When books become popular, you start getting really amazing fan mail and a lot of requests for signed books. But I really wanted to do something really fun and really kind of awesome for my readers, especially those readers who support this series. So we decided to do a Kickstarter. We're going to do them in hardcover with foil, and they're going to be available signed for readers to purchase through the Kickstarter. I'm working with some really amazing New Zealand artists on all the artwork, and my incredible friend Amy is helping me with the logistics.
Yeah, it's really exciting to see Steff's books doing so well that this is the next step.
It was in Nevermore Bookshop where I first discovered punk music. I found a box of battered 1970s zines in the popular music section, and I lost myself in faded photographs of bored teenagers with bleached mohawks. None of them fit in, and they didn't give a shit. I was in love. And fashion became a way to express myself.
I've always enjoyed expressing myself through fashion. I have a lot of fun finding clothing that makes me look on the outside like the Steff that I feel on the inside. Even though I don't know what colours are because I've never seen one, I kind of understand them as a concept and the way that people kind of articulate what colours mean to them. You know, green is like fresh and quite natural, you know, and red is quite vivid and passionate. Clothes are about expressing yourself, they're about kind of telling other people about who you are, and they're also kind of about finding your people. And that's how I met my husband. Met my husband on an archaeological dig and bonded because we were wearing the same Iron Maiden t-shirt. I thought he had a lovely voice and I had a massive crush on him, and I kind of blind girl stalked him for 2 years, which is where, you know, he says hello and I run away.
We like music a lot. We're both into the same sort of heavy metal, which is very hard to find a partner who's into the same music. Yeah, Steff would be the perfect partner. Yeah, I know she's got my back and I've got hers.
I'm quite introverted and he's more extroverted. I'm the eternal optimist and he's a dyed-in-the-wool cynic. Almost because of that, we work really well. We're exactly what the other person needs right when they need it. When I'm freaking out, he's like, it's cool, it's no problem, don't have to worry about it. When he's down in the dumps, I'm here like, always got a smile. That is cheek.
It certainly is.
I have always had these kind of weird, crazy obsessions all the time. I also really love things that are kind of considered sort of ancient skills. So I'm really obsessed with mead brewing. So mead is what's considered the oldest form of alcohol in the world. It's certainly the earliest that's been found archaeologically. So, well, the mead I make is drinkable after 3 months, and it's amazing after a year. The mead that we're making today is like what we sort of call a traditional mead, which basically just means it's plain mead. It's honey, water, and yeast. You need about 12 kgs of honey. What I think used to happen was that you'd be hunter-gatherer and you'd be wandering along and you would see a beehive in a tree, and that honey would drip into the roots of the tree, and so you'd get rainwater and honey kind of gathering in these like pockets in the tree roots, and it would ferment, and then you'd come along and drink that, and you'd be like, oh, yum.
Books really were my salvation, and I'll only be able to read them for a short while longer. The thoughts slapped me across the face, startling me out of my happiness. The ophthalmologist said the changes would be slow at first. My peripheral vision would shrink away until I saw the world through a narrowing tunnel. Then I'd start seeing random colours and lights. Then, at some undetermined point in the future, I'd go completely blind.
You can find your outer thigh. Now squat while you do that side bend, and then come on up. So a little bit more balletic. We like to include everything. Dance, you name it. It's pretty much anything you do off the pole, you can do with the pole. It's just that the pole makes it easier, right? Yeah. Good.
I love to pole dance. That is my new obsession.
Okay, so now right foot is right behind the pole with the toes close to the base. And we're breathing, and we're gonna kick. Here we go. 5. I got this really lovely email from her that was kind of starting out, I have to let you know a little bit about myself. And she went on to say that she, was visually impaired, actually legally blind. once she came for her first session, you know, visually impaired means what to this person? She can do absolutely anything on the pole. I would say that Steff is a really great inspiration for anyone who comes with what they think is a limitation.
So today is the big day where I am going live with the Kickstarter. So I'm a bit nervous, but we're just doing a final check and making sure everything's spelled correctly and everything's looking pretty. Part of our process of getting the Kickstarter out there is to explain to our readers how Kickstarter works, and what they're doing is they're backing this project, and if the project reaches its monetary goal, then it's kind of like pre-ordering this swag set and the books. So it's kind of like a pre-order. There we go, start. Okay.
Maybe we still had no idea why the guys were here or what kind of magic the bookshop possessed. But for the first time in a long time, I felt okay about the future. I felt settled. I felt like I might have the strength to deal with my eventual blindness.
Growing up, I always had this very clear vision of what my life was going to look like. It was going to be filled with adventure and music and art and friends and all these wonderful things. And I sort of never grew up. And I love that. I have a friend who can sew. If I could sort of go back in time and talk to younger Steff, I would tell her, chin up and keep going. So much rejection before I got to a point where, you know, this became a viable career. And if I had quit, then I never would have got to have that incredible experience of having tens of thousands of readers all over the world reading and loving my work. So whatever you do, don't quit before the miracle.